Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PBSE podcast. It is episode 283. What if my addict partner and I disagree about boundaries? Now what?
Dun, dun, dun. Cue the lightning flash.
So
Yes.
this came in from a betrayed partner, and she says, I have a question about boundaries. And she talks about that actually they're doing a lot of recovery work. There's been disclosure, polygraphs, boundaries have been set up, impacts. It sounds like they've been through the full disclosure process with disclosure, impact statements, amends. They've had 3 different sex addiction therapists. They're currently working with CSATs. So there's a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But she says they've come to a situation where she's communicated to him clearly that she needs him as part of her boundaries to feel safe, to feel like things are progressing, to feel like he's taking his recovery seriously. She needs him to be in regular therapy.
Yes.
Sounds like, once a week or once every other week sessions with his CSAT. And initially he agreed to that. But then they, as we know, when you're not authentic and don't express what's truly going on inside of you, which we addicts never do, it finally came out. She could feel the resistance. She could feel that he was not happy with what was going on. And he started scheduling less and less with the therapist. It finally came out that he said that he felt like that she had an emotional gun to his head. And he hadn't backed off of therapy completely. Sounds like it went maybe to once a month or less. But he said, it's my journey and I'm happy to do it, but on my terms. And my terms are when I feel like I need it. And he was open about the fact that he was feeling resentful, that she was trying to dictate how often he should or shouldn't be speaking with the therapist. And then she says, I'm really struggling with this. Is it reasonable for me to set my expectation around frequency of therapy? Or do I need to back off? My boundary is that he sees someone, and he is doing that, just not at the level that I would like. I'm really stuck on this point. I understand his point of view, but at the same time, I fear when he wants to do it will just end up being never. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's a great question, and it does tie in well with some things that we've been doing in the Dare to Connect program. We just wrapped up a massive couple of month-long kind of deep dive, I guess you could say, into boundaries, and so it's coming when this topic is particularly fresh in Mark and I's mind. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple of things to talk about here, right, before we jump into any of this. Just a quick review, because those who've listened to the podcast before, you've probably heard us talk about these rules before. But boundaries, what are they and what are they not? First and foremost, boundaries are supposed to serve us or serve the situation. What that means is that they should be a reflection of our own authentic wants or needs. Okay? What are we needing? What are we not? What can we tolerate? What can we not? What is authentic to us? What is not? And whatever we set them around, they're designed to, the way we term it in Dare to Connect is protect the authenticity and the integrity of whatever that is, whether it's the individual, whether it's the coupleship, whatever it may be. And that definitely holds true here. One of the mistakes that sometimes gets made, and we're not saying that this has happened here, but when you run across a situation like this where there's conflict between two people, where a boundary is at dispute, and we might have a potentially fairly serious issue, is I think that there needs to be a reflection or a review on the part of a person, right? In terms of what is this? What were the original intentions behind this boundary, right? Because any boundary that we set, it needs to be quantifiable, it needs to be verifiable in some way, but it needs to be able to be linked to something authentic. And there are lots of reasons why we counsel people in our program and in our practices to do that. But one of the reasons is so that boundaries are not reactions to things we don't like. It's very easy for boundaries to become weaponized in lots of different ways, and that is one of the ways that that can happen. When we run aground with initially when we set boundaries, we should be doing this work already. But when it does come back to a point where now that these boundaries are clashing with someone else on a very important topic, and these are things that we may need to implement consequences or make changes around. It is always important, I think, to go back a good wisdom point to go back and just ask yourself what okay, I set this boundary. What needs are they trying to meet? Because knowing what that is, what the underlying needs and wants are, is going to be critical for some of the other stuff we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, we always want to design them to create a perimeter of safety around my wants and needs, coupled with outcomes or results or consequences if that doesn't happen. Right? We never want to have boundaries be a way to exert control over another person, make threats, issue ultimatums, which unfortunately in the common culture, that's what boundaries have been relegated to. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
We need a boundary, right? And so the focus was always outward instead of inward. So as we look at those rules, what happens when you get to a big disagreement about the boundary, though? And Steve, you and I run into this with the coupleship work we do all the time.
Yeah.
Be very hard to navigate that fine line that says, yeah, I get it. It's about my wants and needs, but he's not cooperating. He's
Yeah.
not doing the things that bring me safety and help me see that he's progressing. And so he's not cooperating on his side. So how are my wants and needs going to be met if that's the case?
Mm.
Right? Because she gives the actual example here, and it's actually very classic. We've seen this in various forms over the couple of decades we've been
It's
doing
my
this.
journey. I'll do it when I feel like I need it.
Yep. It's my journey,
Yeah.
my terms, right? And then he does finally admit that resentment's been building inside of him, and she's holding a gun to his head, and he's just not happy with it. And and actually, as I'm talking about that right now, kind of tapping into my old Mark the Addict, I wonder how much of his response, well, reaction actually, how much of his reaction to her about this whole thing is just a sense of stubbornness, a sense of you're not going to control me, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah. It could be a pride or an ego thing for
It
sure.
could. I know that would have been the case for me. I would have dug my heels in and resisted being told what to do or dictated to. I hated that.
Well, it could even be kind of a shame response and kind of almost in a juvenile way, asserting one's own independence.
Hmm?
I have an 8-year-old daughter, and so it's our first child, and it's an interesting,
8-month-old
or
daughter.
sorry, not 8-year-old. Thank you, 8 month. Thank you. Yeah, very different context. She's just now starting to do little things for herself independently, like just little things, right? And lately, so the other day I was trying to feed her, and we got her this new set of like, baby like knife, fork, and spoon. So they're like plastic and rounded and, knobby and whatever. And she's actually quite good with it. Problem is she is getting a little bit, and she's wanting to practice, which I totally get. But now she's in the habit of wanting, if you try to feed her, she used to be so good at it, and now she won't. She's
Mm,
like insistent. Like, I got to take the spoon out of your hand. And it's not so she can have something different. She just wants to be the one to put it in there.
that's right. She wants to do it her way.
She's
Yeah.
wanting that sense of accomplishment. She's wanting that sense of control on whatever level an 8-month-old is operating, right? But she's looking for that independence. So again, we say that in a juvenile way, but also we can appreciate there are authentic needs behind that. Where I will say where I will say that there are problems with, and again, this is just based off the narrative that this partner is sharing, is that he's not going deeper with what the needs are. Because I think that everyone should have a right to, dictate their own recovery, but it doesn't feel, and maybe he has shared more than this, but it doesn't feel very, if you're being vulnerable and you're really collaborating with your partner, simply saying, I'll go to therapy when I feel like I need it, even though I can't even quantify what that means. Like, what does that mean?
That's a good, when I'm in such a crisis mode that I got to have a therapist. I mean,
Yeah, because if we're just going back to reactive recovery, everyone who listens to this podcast on the regular knows what that means.
yeah.
And so that's never an acceptable way to approach it. So what does that mean? What thresholds does that meet?
Yeah.
Where what like where so that needs to be able to at least be, if she's going to be able to try to collaborate with you on this, you need to have a clear understanding in your own mind what that means, other than just, well, when I feel like it. That's not an acceptable answer
Yeah. When I, well,
for
or when
providing
I need it.
safety.
Well, how do you quantify that? What does it mean when I need it? Because
Exactly. Like what comes up when you get to a certain level of suicidality, when you get to a certain level of homicidality, when you get to a certain level, like what? Like what are the triggers,
I've been
right, for
super,
that?
super feeling urges to go act out with pornography or whatever. What is she needs to know what that you need to know what that means first of all as the addict, and then share it with her as so that she has something that she can identify, something she can verify, something that she can
Yes.
understand.
Now that's not going to necessarily fix the issue because we got lots more to talk about here, but it would at least open up the door for there to be some sort of discussion here. But you are limiting, this addict partner is limiting the discussion, the dialogue, definitely on the way that he's handling that.
Because I at least know for me and a lot of guys I've worked with, and again, I don't know this situation with this guy, so but this may not be him at all. But I know this would have been an absolutely very convenient avoidance opportunity.
Oh,
I'll just
sure.
do this when I need it.
Sure.
Right there goes, out of the way, off the table, solved.
Well, that was my initial resistance. I mean, Mark knows my story. That was my initial resistance to anything, except I kind of had the extra weight of being a therapist. Hun, I am a therapist. I know when I need to go to therapy.
I know when I need to go. Yeah, that's classic.
That's how I chuckle because that's how I used to say it,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
which is that's such bunk.
Well, and if I and we would
Uh,
invite her, what are the specific needs, specific wants and needs behind all of this?
yes.
Right? If she's finding a big wall coming up because he's resisting this regular therapy, I'm sure for her it's not just check the box, he went to a therapist, I feel good now.
Yeah.
There's stuff behind this, and I would invite her. Does she first of all know really clearly in her own mind and heart what is she looking for with that request? Right? How does seeing a therapist on a frequent basis meet her wants and needs? What are those? Because I'll
Well,
bet
and
a whole bunch behind this than just, oh, you went to a therapist this week. Good, we're good.
yeah. Well, and my wife, if she doesn't come on the podcast, obviously, but if she does come on periodically on Dare to Connect, we'd love to have you come join us. But if she were here, because Brittany is exceptional at boundaries, and I distinctly remember once where we were considering going back to therapy. That's happened several times over the 15 years we've been doing this. And one of the times when we were considering it is, without even knowing it, she was very good at doing exactly what Mark's talking about. And she listed off anger issues that she still saw with me. Look, it's not that I haven't seen good things. It's not that we are in a much better place than we are, but I see you flying off the handle, right? With like these little things, or
Mm,
getting reactive with X, Y, or Z. And this is what she said next, and I want to kind of incorporate this in because this is, like I said, she's kind of a poster child for how to do this the right way. She said, I need there to be a reduction in these kinds of reactions. It's not safe for me, and here are the reasons why. I'm open to other ideas if you have them, but you said you've tried other things and those don't seem to be working. So if you've got another idea besides therapy, I'm open to that dialogue, but I don't have one. You see where she was coming from? She wasn't necessarily leading out with this is the absolute ultimatum. It's this, and this. She was trying to collaborate
yeah.
and say, look, I mean, if there is another way that this can happen, I'm okay with that, but I'm not aware of one. And historically, this is what I've seen work. So, my need here is for you to be less reactive, Steve. If you can achieve that with, by painting a pentagram and goat's blood on the ground and doing a seance, so be it. If you can do that through some other method, I'm open to that. But what I've seen work is you regularly doing therapy until until we're able to kind of figure out what's going on.
Hey, everybody. PBSE podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. Mark and I found ourselves in that place. Messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today.
Well, and she kind of alludes, and again, we're inviting her to go really deep on what's behind all of this, but one of the things I did notice is he did admit that when he does see a therapist regularly, he feels good. It goes well. And so it's a very, very short connection to say, well, then if he's not seeing a therapist regularly, then how quickly can things not go good? How quickly can he not be in a good place? If he's telling me that regularly seeing one, it actually turns out well, right? And then what's behind that? Fears of relapse on her part, fears of him not continuing to be honest, fears of him going back to old behaviors of betrayal, right? There's a whole bunch going on behind the scenes here, and I would encourage her to get really clear about what that is. At the same time, there is a big invite from us to this addict. I wish somebody had sat me down and somehow communicated to me what I'm about to say. In her asking for this boundary and him seeing a therapist, regularly, this is a bid for connection. This is an invitation. Please come and collaborate with me. Please come and see my wants and my needs. Please see my concerns. Please see how much I want you to succeed and I want us to succeed. Can he set aside his resistance and his defensiveness and his legitimately wanting to do it his way and have his say? That's reasonable. But can he kind of put that on a shelf for a second to do what we call lean in with genuine curiosity? I hear you with the boundary of wanting me to go see a therapist regularly, I am really curious to understand what's behind that for you. Can you please help me to understand what you're feeling, what your concerns are, what your desires are, what your fears are? I really want to be here shoulder to shoulder with you and just give me the opportunity to understand you. I was never able in my addiction years to put myself aside long enough to do what I just described.
Yeah.
I missed a huge opportunity to know my wife, to collaborate with her, to let her know that I really did care and I really was interested to learn about her wants and needs and then to do my very best to help meet those. I was too stuck in, quit telling me what to do. I got a gun to my head. I'm going to do this my way. That canceled out the whole leaning in with genuine curiosity to really know my partner.
Yeah. Well, and shifting gears because we're already time is just flying here on the podcast today. One of the key rules that we haven't mentioned, but we need to because this is going to kind of lead into the remainder of the podcast is boundaries always have to be set recognizing the authenticity and the autonomy of the other person or
Correct.
people involved, right? I can only influence or change what I can influence and change. And so engaging in ultimatums or threats that either aren't accurate or are not designed to protect the self, but rather to change behavior are not acceptable points for setting boundaries or healthy ways of those are attempts to control, not to try to keep oneself safe. Sometimes they can look the same, but it's important that it's coming from that core motivation or that core root.
Yeah.
But going into that, so what happens now? Let's say that just for sake of argument, now we think that there might be some wiggle room in this coupleship, but just with what we've talked about so far, right? If we can get back to the drawing board on what are his needs and her needs, what are his wants and her wants, could this be the right call? Maybe, but maybe it's not as impassable as it seems. Okay. But let's say that it is. Let's say that for him and for her, she needs him in therapy once a week. He is unwilling to do that. He's not willing to go to a specific time frame. And by the way, we should say this too. There is a major boundary breach here because regardless of whatever these two decide on, he does need to own and be accountable for and possibly make amends for the fact that he in therapy made commitments and is now breaking them.
Yes.
And that regardless, it doesn't, whether that was because of conflict avoidance on his part or because he had indigestion that day, it really doesn't matter. A key element of creating safety and rebuilding trust in a relationship is consistency. And when we break that on the addict side, the damage is immense, and that's a big deal.
That's true.
So
It's
that
very,
needs to be looked at.
yeah.
Regardless of the reasoning why, the minute you do that, you are undercutting so much of the other work you're trying to do. Anyway, that's another podcast for another day. Unless you want to come to D2C, and you can just ask us about it tomorrow or on Wednesday. We're happy to talk about it then. Um, but let's say that they're both stuck. Okay, so this is where we're at. He's saying nope, it's going to be when I want. She's saying, hey, it's got to be once a week. This is now we have a question, right? Once we've examined the wants and needs around this, ideally we're going to try to collaborate. But if collaboration isn't possible, and again, this should be done ideally beforehand. Now there needs to be a realistic look at, okay, well, what are the consequences that need to be implemented or the outcomes that are going to create safety or whatever it is that we're trying to do with the boundary in the absence of compliance with it,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
right?
As she said, I've done my deep work. I truly do know that these are my authentic wants and needs. I'm communicating them to you clearly. I've let you know how important this is to me. But you're saying that they're in direct conflict with your authentic wants and needs that you have thoroughly and deeply explored, and that you've bounced it off your support system, you've bounced it off your therapist, and you're coming and saying, we just don't match up on this.
Yeah.
Right now,
Well,
what?
now, yeah, well, because now we're in the realm of, now we're in the realm of there is a potential incompatibility here. Now,
Mhm.
again, we've said this before on the podcast, and we will say it again. In my experience, both personally as a guy really who's gotten a lot better, but used to be historically very shitty with boundaries, both on receiving and abiding by them as well as setting them. But also with clients, I would say at least 90% of these issues when they come into my office are actually navigable using some of the skills and other skills, including the ones we've just talked about. Okay. If we're able to get past the ego, get connected with the wants, get past the shame, work through the other issues at play, recognize them, bring them into a room, there's oftentimes common ground where we can maybe make a shift that's authentic for both people. Okay.
Yeah, we often talk about in our collaboration as a coupleship, are there alternative, verifiable ways to have these wants and needs met,
Yes.
right?
And so a good therapist or a program like D2C or support in other places can help to maybe de-escalate some of those issues that are complicating things, and you can go that route. But if not, and we are now looking at a potential incompatibility, now the next hard question is, to what depth does the incompatibility run? Because in many ways, that's going to kind of dictate the outcomes here, right?
Yes.
Because there are different levels of need for different things, right? When any if anyone is realistically looking at their boundaries, I have certain boundaries, for example, around my spouse and her conduct, right? If Brittany were to steal something from a store, this is completely out of character. It's just a random example. Let's say Brittany stole something from a store and she like brought it home. I have a hard time seeing where that as an isolated incident would be cause for me to end our marriage. It might involve some really uncomfortable discussions. It might involve some legal issues. I mean, it could involve a lot of things, but I don't know that that would be the breakup of a relationship. If she, however, came home, holding a bloody knife and said, "Hey, I just offed the neighbor 3 doors down." Well, now we have a serious compatibility issue.
Right.
Right. And again, I'm being very facetious, but I'm trying to demonstrate the point, right? The reality is we carry these things to different depth because I can't, as much as I love Brittany, I can't be married liability wise and otherwise, as well as to keep my child safe to someone who has a propensity to killing people, right? To unaliving people. So the consequences, right, or the outcomes of that are going to be very different. And each of us has to be realistic with, given this boundary, how deep does it sit with me? What areas of my world does it impact? And what am I going to need to do in terms of meeting my need, right, to keep myself safe in whatever way that safety is now no longer being looked after, right? Or that integrity or that authenticity.
Yeah. And again, this is these it's why I often stray away from the word consequences with regard to boundaries, because I think it portrays a message that's so common in the culture. If you don't do this, then this is what's going to happen to you, right?
Yeah.
It's not what we're talking about.
Well, the more accurate way to put it is what we've mentioned, right? It's outcomes,
It's
right?
outcomes, it's results. You
Because
choose.
there are positive and negative consequences to either the adherence or breaking of any boundary,
Correct, right?
right?
There's outcomes and results, whichever way you choose.
Both. And that's for any boundary, by the way. I know the ones that we're all aware. Mark and I are very much aware. When people think boundaries, they never think positive.
No,
But there are, right? When boundaries are fulfilled, when boundaries are met, and when they're authentically set, that creates a whole beautiful discussion that we had a few weeks ago on the podcast where, I mean, a partner, for example, who takes the time to authentically map out their boundaries and the outcomes around them will have taken the time not just to map out here's all the bad shit that could happen if these things don't match up for us. The positive side of that also should be showing this is the kind of relationship we could have if these needs of mine are met, and
exactly.
if your needs can be compatible with mine. In other words, boundaries are can be a prison, or they can be the love map to the relationship.
Precisely.
So
Yep.
anyway, sorry.
I love that. Right. And it's so I mean, there's as you unpack this podcast, there's a lot.
Yes, there is.
There is a ton that we're talking about here, right? But we invite her to,
Because what consequences might she have,
yeah, what
right?
outcomes and results look like. And let's say that they start at level A. And as she's, by the way, what we always say about boundaries, I would encourage her to continually, consistently be communicating to him the impact that him choosing to do or not do
Absolutely.
this has on her.
Yeah.
That's her side of the street. You get to choose you and you get to do it your way, but I have to tell you, this is the impact that those choices have on me directly. And I just need you to know what this is doing or not
Yeah.
doing for me and for us. Right? Very
Yep.
important. That consistent dialogue keep happening.
100%. Absolutely. And she's got to figure out again what that is for her. Once again, not to change him, but to keep herself safe, right? So, say for example, part of this boundary is, well, I'm not going to be able to. That violates my safety to a point where intimacy in certain areas, whether it's physically or otherwise, may not be possible for me. Unless this is met in some way, or we're able to navigate this somehow. Oftentimes, again, a guy can have the propensity to look at that and say, well, that's a punishment. No, it's not. It's an outcome. It may feel like a punishment, but if the boundary is authentically set, it's not about you. If I was married to anyone, Tom, Dick, or Harry, or whoever down the road, I would need to feel X, Y, and Z things in my relationship in order to be physical with someone, in order to be living with someone, in order to whatever. Given our circumstances and our background, this is what I need. And if you're not able to provide that, I need to keep myself safe. This isn't about changing James into whoever we want him to be. This is about me being safe and secure in my needs, given my own authenticity with whoever I'm with. And if we as addicts can back up from this, I guess, the place of defaulting to feeling like it's a punishment, and if partners can do the work to make sure that the authenticity is happening on their side, that's where boundaries really take, they really become what they were always supposed to be.
Yeah.
So,
And I would, as we're closing up, one little thought occurred to me. If we weren't clear on this, I'm gonna be doubly clear on it. If she has done her deep work on really determining the specific authentic wants and needs she has behind this request for regular therapy, and she really knows what that is, and she's clearly communicated that to him. So he says, I know what's under all this request for therapy now. Okay, I understand. You know what? Having shared all that with me, here are some alternatives that I have, perhaps not such a high frequency of therapy. Here are some other ways that I think I can meet the wants and needs you've expressed. What do you think about those? Right?
yeah,
I just want to be very clear that that's also part of this.
yeah,
And if we get to the end of the day where it just becomes clear that he's just not willing pretty much in any way to meet those deep, authentic wants and needs of hers, now we're talking about, are we even compatible at all?
mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Well, guys, as always, thank you for being with us here on the podcast for a brief time. If you've liked what you've heard here today, as always, we invite you to come check out our Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples. If you like PBSE, you will love D2C. Come check that out. Give our 2-week free trial on that program a try. You can find that at daretoconnectnow.com, and the free trial button is up there in the upper right hand corner. If you are wanting to have your questions answered in a podcast fashion, and obviously with the time delay and everything like that, but we do take those questions and we do answer those in the order that they come in. You're more than welcome to send those also by going to daretoconnectnow.com and clicking on the banner at the top of the page that says it has the PBSE podcast logo, and that will take you to a page where at the bottom you can click on the contact form and send those in to us as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us. Once again, we love and appreciate all of you, and just all of the appreciation and encouragement that comes in from all of you to us. You're why we do this. And we will definitely look forward to the next PBSE episode with all of you.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everybody.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.